25th edition of the eDuck podcast. I am your host, Robby Boydson, alongside my co-host in Eugene, Erik Scopel. Erik, how you doing?
Pretty good down here on a Wednesday, a beautiful Wednesday, might I add. A nice sunrise, or should I say sunset, setting here in the east in Eugene, Oregon. There's a little visual for you guys who are watching this tomorrow, probably wondering what it was like at 5:48 p.m. on Wednesday evenings.
Well, you know, it's always great to get a good weather report. Real quick note for the listeners out there, and thank you for your continued support. We're getting subscribers every week, and it's great. One thing I did want to note is we have had a few suggestions or actually questions about what's going to happen with the podcast in terms of getting it onto just an all-audio format. As of right now, YouTube's the best way for us to track views and get the podcast up in a very timely manner. That being said, I have been looking into a couple of different options for just all audio media so that it's a little bit more friendly for people with phones that just want to download a podcast or something like that, so it's not draining your battery. And I think we'll have that available, if not for this podcast, hopefully for Saturday, and if not, definitely by next week. So be on the lookout for that. I'll keep everyone updated on the progress of that so that we'll have this in a few different mediums, hopefully pick up some viewership. And and please, if you're a fan of the podcast, spread the word. Tell your friends, tell your family, have them listen in. We're making them short and sweet now. It doesn't take much time, and we're always dropping good knowledge. And we're going to continue to do that again today. And I think we're going to start backtracking a little bit. This is, of course, the Washington-Oregon preview, a big game this week. Rivalry week, exactly. But Oregon had a little bit of a shakeup with their lineup here earlier this week. We mentioned Colt Laerla's absence, their normal starting tight end, a junior out of Hillsboro. He was not in attendance for the Colorado game, was left home, and then Sunday notified Mark Helfrich that he would be leaving the team immediately. So as of right now, for the going forward for the future, Colt Laerla is no longer an Oregon Duck. Will instead look to jumpstart his pro career with a little off-season training. And Erik, you were down there on Monday and Tuesday just trying to get a little bit of reaction. What was it like down there for those players?
Well, yeah, and if you read the report, you kind of already know the answer to that question. But, in typical Oregon style, it was probably a couple-minute grieving process, if you will, for the players and the staff. Probably a little bit of shock, although you kind of wonder behind the scenes if it felt like it was inevitable that he was going to leave just after the way the last month progressed. But everybody pretty much said was we've got Johnny Munt, we've got Farrell Brown, and we've got Evan Bayless. We're ready to move forward and prepare for Washington. So, I don't think anybody harbors any negative feelings or any disappointment in Colt, maybe a little disappointment. But for the most part, it was let's move forward and prepare for what's going to be a very, very competitive game against one of the premier teams in this conference.
And it's fair to say at this point that they're not treating this as a distraction, especially heading into a big rivalry game.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And like we talked on I guess it was Saturday about the two players that were kind of up in the air in terms of their status for this weekend. The other one being DeAnthony Thomas. Let's move on to that because I feel like Laerla's kind of the dead horse that we've kicked too much. There was a report that I posted on the board about. It was a Portland Tribune report. This is regarding Laerla, that he apparently was accused of some sort of incident back in January of 2012 where he pushed somebody. We don't want to. I don't think it's worth it to really even bring these things up. But that's kind of why I say it feels like we're kicking a dead horse because it just feels like it's dragging. It's over now. There's been a definitive decision made by Colt to leave the program. So I think it's best that we just continue it like the rest of the team is going to do and just kind of move forward. With that said, let's talk a little bit about DeAnthony Thomas, who it appears his status is still uncertain. So, again, this is a fluid process. So if you're listening to this podcast, even perhaps tomorrow, which is Thursday, we may have a more definitive picture of what his, how involved he'll be in Saturday's game plan. But as it stands right now, had the opportunity to speak with DeAnthony today. It sounds like he says it's feeling better. The boot is off. He's been participating in some drills, but not really much in practice. He's able to run on it, which is a good sign. But he says he didn't want to jump back if it was 80% or 90%. He wants to be 100%. I asked him, so you're not willing to play if it's 100%, that's not going to be a consideration. He said not at all. So it sounds like it's kind of all or nothing with D'Anthony. So again, we don't know how much of this is trying to play mind games with Steve Sarkisian and the Washington staff, and how much of this is reality. But it sounds like his status is very much up in the air, and he's not really willing to give it a go unless he's full go.
Well, and I guess in some ways you can't blame him. I think a lot of fans out there would want to see D'Anthony suit up. Even a 90% D'Anthony is better than 100% of a lot of D1 players, given how dynamic he is and what he means to that Oregon offense. But given how they looked against Colorado, given that this team, especially since the Kelly era began, has never been really reliant on one player. It's been all about the system. One guy goes down, next guy steps up. You're going to see that this weekend with the tight ends. You've already seen it a little bit so far this season. And Oregon was able to take control of the Colorado game after getting jumped on a little bit there early. And so I think, it's good. They're going to need D'Anthony later on. They're hitting the meat of their schedule right now. This is the first in what's going to be a few tougher games for Oregon heading forward. I think there's going to be a little bit of apprehension just given that it is a rival. And if you look at it, this game probably does mean more to Washington. Given the fact that they've lost 9 years in a row. They're trying to rebuild that program under Sarkisian. They just came off a big loss to Stanford, and really, if they want any hope of really kind of hanging around for BCS contention or anything like that, they're going to need an upset here. They've got a newly renovated stadium. They're going to bring a loud crowd to Husky Stadium, that new renovated stadium. Game day is going to be there. There's a lot of hype surrounding this game, and to not have D'Anthony Thomas there brings it down a little bit for Oregon fans. But again, I think you're going to want him more against a Stanford later on in the year, against a UCLA, those types of teams, and have him healthier down the line for those bigger games, as opposed to maybe risking an injury or re-aggravating something against Washington.
Yeah, absolutely. And you did touch on it, now transitioning a little bit. But this is a rivalry week. And, I asked, this is totally transitioning now from D'Anthony just to kind of the preparation going forward, but had the opportunity to talk to some coaches. Those interviews are online if you want to check out the website, or even go to Steve Summers' YouTube page. You've got interviews from wide receivers coach Matt Lubick, offensive line coach Steve Greatwood, and defensive line coach Ron Aiken. But you can check those out, and it doesn't sound like, and this is kind of not going to surprise, this isn't any breaking news here, because preparation is the same, but you get the feeling, and both Aiken and Lubick were pretty candid about this, that there is more excitement and anticipation from the players. That doesn't mean that they're preparing any harder. That doesn't mean that their focus is any more focused, but that there is a little bit that's kind of in the air. That is a real factor, perhaps, and that this game does mean a lot. Helfrich, Chip Kelly was so funny because his face his opponent, he wouldn't even acknowledge rivalry games.
No.
Helfrich is from the state of Oregon. He grew up an Oregon fan. He understands these rivalries, and he was willing to kind of say that he understands that they're established. And like I said on Tuesday's wrap up with Steve, our publisher, what they can do as part of the rivalry is go out and win football games, and that's what they have done for the last 9 years. So they've gone out and win football games. So that remains their focus, is to uphold that part. That's the part of the rivalry that they can control. They can't control anything else. The only thing they control is their preparation and then hopefully their victory.
Well, and that leads me to want to transition a little bit into like some keys for either side there, and allowing me to play a little bit of devil's advocate, because I've been kind of doing that a little bit more. Trying to see things from the Washington perspective, given how they've rebuilt the program. Again, I touched on the fact that they this game probably does mean more to them on their side. They're probably going to carry a little bit more emotion into that. And looking at last year's game, they come into Oregon, they fall right back down 21-0. There's a pick six in the first quarter. Really, the only thing they could hang their hat on was Bishop Sankey, 25 carries for 104 yards and a couple touchdowns in that game. But Washington was never really competitive in that game. Haven't really been super competitive largely for the past 9 years. I believe the margin of victory has all been over 17 points in these games. Yeah. And, looking at it this way, if you're Washington and you're trying to take on Oregon, that's where you wanted to look at that Colorado game last week. Colorado, giving them, some of the praise we gave them on Saturday, they came out and punched Oregon in the mouth early. Jumped on them, probably should have jumped on them a little bit more, settled for some field goals when they probably should have went for it. And I think that's going to be a little bit of a blueprint for Washington to know, okay, if they're going to get their chance, they're going to take it. They've installed the hurry-up offense. Their defense is looking better. But again, Oregon makes you pay for mistakes. And Oregon will beat you with deep plays. I mean, they've established that they can make the big play and just hurt you either on the ground or through the air now with how Marcus has been throwing the ball lately. Last week, Braylon Addison's 75-yard touchdown comes to mind in that type of a situation. So if you're Washington, you take your chances early and you just keep taking them. You got to limit your turnovers. Again, that's one thing. Colorado, those 2 early turnovers did not help them. And they had 5. Washington had 5 in that game last year in Eugene. Also had 8 penalties for 102 yards. Those things need to be limited if Washington wants any chance of keeping up with Oregon in this game. While they are improved, they look a lot better. That game against Stanford last week, the little bit that I got to watch of it, they did look like a good team and a team that could have knocked off Stanford. They played 10 times. Washington's probably going to win a few of those games. So Washington's not going to be a pushover. But again, I still think there's a big talent disparity there in terms of what Oregon can do with their system and what Washington's still learning to do with theirs.
Well, and you just touched on it right at the end there. I think one of the big keys for me is that, they say imitation is the greatest form of flattery. And what we've seen and what the coaches have brought up all week is that especially offensively, Washington has kind of started to mirror what Oregon has done, since the beginning of the Chip Kelly era. And so you talk about that talent disparity. Well, think back to when Chip took the reins there. What did they do when they didn't have, the same level of talent as, say, USC, who was really the predominant, power for that period of time? Is they started to go fast. They started to get the ball out in space and take advantage of mismatches anywhere they could. And I think that's kind of what Washington has tried to do thus far this year, and frankly, pretty successfully, with the exception of the first half against Stanford. And so, I agree. I think there's a talent disparity. I think Oregon has better players across the board. Probably, I'm not sure there's a position group in which I would say, hey, Washington is a really heavy favorite there, except for maybe tight end now with Seferian-Jenkins over Colt Layerla because Layerla's gone.
Right.
But with that said, I think Washington has done a great job so far this year of kind of transitioning into that. It's not exactly the same thing Oregon runs. There's a little bit more pro style there, but they're trying to hurry up. They're trying to get the ball out in space. And I think the one thing that is really differs from how Oregon has operated this year under Mark Helfrich is that do they feed the ball to Bishop Sankey. I mean, 35 carries in one game and then 40 in another this year. That's 75 carries in just 2 games. Oregon through 5 games doesn't have a ball carrier with even that total. So, I mean, they really lean on that running game, and they really lean on the trio of wide receivers that have kind of led those guys offensively. I think if Oregon can really bottle up Bishop Sankey, that's going to put a heck of a lot of pressure on Keith Price to throw the football, and he's done a tremendous job this year. But you have to remember, Oregon's secondary is arguably the best in the conference, and maybe even the best in the country. I think that you challenge those corners as much as you can. But you saw what even happened last week when Colorado challenged them early. Terrence Mitchell ends up picking off 2 passes, and Connor Wood finishes the game just 11 for 33 passing.
Right, and I think you hit something there as well, going back to Sankey, is that's probably going to be Oregon's biggest priority defensively, or at least should be, in my opinion, is bottling him up. Given what Sankey was able to do to Oregon last year, he knows he can get through that defensive line. Now, the defensive line is a year older, a year wiser. I think, again, you touched on the secondary. The defensive line has one job, and that's putting pressure on or making Bishop Sankey gain those yards. And given the fact that, coming home today, listening to Steve Sarkisian on the radio, and he said that they are watching Sankey's carries. He doesn't think he's going to reach a 35 or 40 carry game like that again. But at the same time, if you're going to go in these types of games, you're going to go with what works. Against the number 2 team in the nation, that doesn't come around a lot. A team that a lot of people probably west of the Mississippi, think have a shot to be the number 1 team in the nation. This is a huge game for Washington and a huge game at home. They're going to, if that means rushing the ball with Bishop Sankey 50 times because it's working, I think Steve Sarkisian would do that if he's got a chance to win. And I mean, you look at what Washington's been able to do and improve offensively right now. Oregon's second in the nation, averaging 630 yards a game, because no one can catch up to the ungodly numbers that Baylor's putting up right now. But Washington's sitting behind them with 557 yards per game, total yards. They're almost dead even in passing yards. Washington eclipsing them just a little bit there, 298 to 294. Oregon still has the advantage rushing, but again, Oregon's still doing running back by committee. Washington really relying on Sankey and a guy who has some confidence against this team. Where the big difference is points scored. Oregon, again, just makes you pay for your mistakes. I think an advantage for Oregon heading into this game is the fact that they haven't lost a technical road game since 2009. They always come prepared to play on the road. Husky Stadium has never really been too much of a factor over the last decade in terms of them, kind of shaking off the cobwebs. I think maybe getting jumped on a little bit by Colorado last week will keep them from having that happen to them again this week. Because Oregon, again, they have to limit the big plays too. If Washington gets some momentum, you can see that if you knock Oregon back a little bit, and I've said it before, you saw it with that Stanford game last year. You knock them back a little bit, get them out of rhythm. Oregon can look like a different team. And if you got a chance to read, there's an article on Oregon Live this week about and it raised a great question: is what's Marcus Mariota going to be like if this game comes down to crunch time? Because there really hasn't been a good sample size of what he's looked like in a very tight, close game situation with a couple minutes left on the clock. Really, the Stanford game was that last year. He did okay, but again, they relied too much on their special teams, which ended up costing them. So, I'm interested to see if Washington can keep it close. They did a great job against Stanford last week. This is definitely a different Washington team going forward. I think they've made great improvements. But again, and I think this is a good way to kind of segue into our predictions here is I still think Oregon takes this game, and I think they can definitely win this by double digits, and I think Washington's really going to have to double their efforts that they had against Stanford in order to beat Oregon.
Well, and if you go back to the predictions I've made the last couple of weeks, I honestly don't think I gave Washington enough credit. I had them being upset by Arizona. They went out and beat Arizona, I believe, by 18 points up in Seattle. I had them losing, I think, pretty handily to the Cardinal. They went out and they lost by 3 points, and if it wasn't for a controversial call, albeit it looked like it was the right one, they would have had a chance to come down and perhaps tie the game or even win it in regulation. So I think Washington, along with Stanford, and of course those are the games that everybody's kind of circling on the schedule, are really going to be the two greatest tests for Oregon all season long. And I don't think that's surprising by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not making any statements right now that are blowing people's minds, but I think what Washington has done this year is actually pretty tremendous in terms of, this is a program that under Sarkisian has really just been kind of 500 every single season, and then gone and played a bowl game, but not been extremely successful doing that. I think this team is set up right now, and I think there's going to be a level of urgency because this is Keith Price's year. He's been a starting quarterback there this is his third season. Of course, his freshman year, he made his collegiate starting debut against Oregon down at Autzen and lost a game that was close until the third quarter when Oregon just blew the doors off of it. But I think there's a level of urgency up in Seattle right now because this is going to be Keith Price, like I said, his last hurrah, if you will. And I think they're going to come and bring everything they've got because they realize they might not have it this good for a while after this season, just like Oregon probably felt the same way with Michael James a couple of seasons ago. So I think it's going to be pretty competitive. Oregon's going to get Washington's best shot like they always do. If we're making a score prediction, I still think Oregon wins. I think I'm going to say Oregon scores 2 less touchdowns than they average. So I'm going to say they score about 42 points. 42 points. And Washington scores about 2 more touchdowns than Oregon usually allows for what will probably be something like 28 points. So yeah, I'll take 43 to 28 because I say Oregon goes for 2 the first time he gets it.
All right. Yeah, I'm not going to differ too much with you there. I think Oregon's going to be able to score a little bit more, especially if they're able to force some turnovers there early on. That's how Oregon really kind of Yeah, that's how they turn a score from down 7-0 to up 42-7 very quickly. Again, this offense is scoring at an alarming pace. I don't think that stops. I think they might get slowed a little bit in the beginning, but Oregon knows Washington as well as Washington knows Oregon. Oregon's been able to put up a lot of points in recent years. I think they actually do top 50. I think they get that sixth straight game. I'm going to put them at a 52-28 score. I think you're right on with the Washington scoring. I think this is an improved offense, but again, I foresee some mistakes there. And if the pressure starts getting to the Huskies, no offense. Again, they've really improved it. I've been, kind of in the background, claiming that they're a better program as they've been getting better. But I still think, Oregon's got that big talent disparity there that's going to show on Saturday.
Okay, and we will be. We'll have to see on Saturday and wait and see who's closer, or if we're even remotely close ourselves. If Washington obviously has a chance to win the football game, which is something that neither of us really discussed too much. But yeah, again, the game will be played up in Seattle at the new Husky Stadium. Kickoff is set for around 1 p.m. Pacific time. The game will be televised on Fox Sports 1. It depends on how you perceive him. The great Gus Johnson or the very annoying Gus Johnson will be calling the game along with Charles Davis. What do you think about Gus Johnson?
I'm a Gus Johnson fan.
Yeah, I like him in March Madness. I don't like him calling football games or soccer games personally, but
I think soccer's a little bit out of his range. I don't mind him for football, but definitely I agree with you that go back, watch Isaiah Thomas Pac-12 title game. That's about as good of a call as you're going to hear in college basketball. Yeah. So let's move on real quick to the rest of the Pac-12 slate here. Sure. I believe Thursday night's your Arizona USC game. Am I correct there, Eric?
You are right on there. Yeah, from the LA Coliseum, the USC Trojans hosting the Arizona Wildcats. Neither team has a conference victory this season, which I think is pretty surprising. Considering I think that these were two of the teams, at least in my mind, I saw vying for the NFC. Too much NFL on the mind for the Pac-12 South Championship. Of course, USC has been tremendously underachieving under what is the former head coach Lane Kiffin. Ed Orgeron takes over for the Trojans this weekend. Robbie, what do you think here? I mean, is it going to be a first game? Fortunately, the first game's at home, which sometimes helps, but is it going to be what do you think the transition is going to be like this weekend? Well,
I think the fact that obviously they kept it in-house, but Orgeron is definitely a respected figure around there. I think that's the right guy to go in there and have the players rally around. I think there's going to be that week off gave everybody to process everything. I think they're going to come in a little bit more prepared. By no means is this going to look like a extremely more polished USC team, I don't think. But like you said, being at home and then that 2-week break, I think is going to play a difference. And maybe it's just my perception of USC from going up watching them. Arizona struggled, and I haven't really gotten a good sense of what Arizona really is this season. So I'll take USC. Let's go like a 20-17 game down at the Coliseum.
Okay, and I think one part of this that you're forgetting here with USC is that Marquise Lee is listed as very questionable, which sounds more like he's doubtful. So USC, I don't understand how someone can be very questionable or not very questionable or just questionable. So, but it sounds like they'll be without their best player offensively. Probably the best player on their team, new coach. I think this is I don't want to say it's an upset right for the picking, but I think this is a game that the Wildcats come in and win. I think I picked Arizona to win pretty much every week.
Yeah, I think you have. You've been pretty close.
I don't know what it is, but I love Rich Rod's team. I just kind of like the style of play, probably because I've been following Oregon for so long. I will take Arizona to come in and get the. I don't want to say it's an upset, but they're going to go in and win. I think, and I'll take them pretty decisively. I'll say 37 to 24.
All right. Well, let's move on to Stanford, Utah. That game taking place on Saturday. Stanford obviously coming off a big home win against Washington in what could be a decisive contest there in the Pac-12 North. Utah putting up quite a big fight against UCLA, unable to complete the comeback last Thursday night, but really showing that this is a team that you can't treat as just an afterthought. Stanford should come in here and win this game, but Stanford has gotten caught napping. Take Washington last year, for example. Eric, do you foresee anything like that happening, or do you think Stanford rolls?
No, I don't think I see anything like that happening. I will say one thing. If there's two quarterbacks who I think I kind of misinterpreted entering the season, it would probably be Travis Wilson at Utah and Kevin Hogan at Stanford. I think Hogan has been, to me, largely disappointing, at least in what I've seen from him, and Wilson has been really impressive, even though he's kind of got a knack for turning it over in key situations. Again, though, I think Stanford's they're just so much better and so much better to coach than pretty much everybody in this conference, with the exception of Oregon and probably USC. That I don't think Utah's good enough. I don't think they're there yet. Give Wilson a couple more years. Give those guys some time to kind of get better and get used to playing in this conference, and then I think they can really push some teams around. But that said, I think Stanford wins, and I think, again, pretty decisively. I don't think they score a lot of points because that's not really their style, but I'll take them 34 to 25.
Okay. Yeah, I can't disagree with you too much there. There's a part of me, after taking Utah last week, thinking they could pull the upset against UCLA. I thought they were, ended up coming up short. I've liked what I've seen from Utah thus far this year, even though they do tend to lose out. They keep games close, and Wilson really keeps that game. He keeps Utah in it. He's just kind of got this never say die mentality, and he'll do it with the legs or with his arm if he needs to. Again, though, I agree with you. It needs to limit those turnover mistakes. Hogan has not lost as a Stanford starter. I don't see that happening now. He's really grown this year, and Stanford, there's a part of me that says that they're going to come out a little flat, especially after a big emotional win at home last week. But they should win this game. I'll take them at I'll take a 28-17 victory. I'd like to think Utah would score more points, but I just don't see it happening.
All right, let's move on down here. Later in the evening, there are 3 7 or 7:30 games slated for Saturday. The first of which is a 7 o'clock meeting between the Colorado Buffaloes, who Oregon just defeated last weekend, and the Arizona State Sun Devils, who Oregon does not play at all this season. Colorado so far winless in the conference with 2 losses to the Oregon schools. Arizona State, of course, with that beatdown on USC and also lost to Stanford, have played 2 of the most talented teams in the conference, and now they're playing arguably the least talented team. That, to me, is a blueprint for a pretty one-sided game. Do you agree with that, Robbie?
I do, and I think, given the fact that ASU probably should have pulled out that game against Notre Dame last week, and they're probably upset given that they came off that real emotional high against USC, only to come back and fall to Notre Dame. I think they're going to use that as motivation, knowing that also a loss to Colorado would really put some things in jeopardy for them. This is a must-win game for Arizona State. I think they win this one. I think they win it handily. Again, Colorado, it's not just the Oregon game. They didn't look very good against Oregon State either. I don't think they're going to be a factor in the Pac-12 this year. They've got the ability to again, throw some punches, but they're not going to last 12 rounds. So let's go. Arizona State takes this one 35-10. I think they win this one pretty handily.
35. They're only going to score 35 points against that Colorado defense. I think it'll be, I'm going to say 55-17.
Okay. Yeah, no, I like the low score this week.
I noticed that. You like low scores, and I like weird scores. I like putting in extra numerals here and there just to make things interesting, because I always assume there's going to be a missed field goal or extra point or a safety, just because I've probably watched too many Oregon games, because that always seems to happen.
Yeah, they train you for it.
You have weird scores. So, and then finally the two late games in the evening. First, California at UCLA on ESPN2. That's going to be a strange game to watch on ESPN2. I guess it's kind of fortunate for the rest of the country that it's 7:30 and 10:30 Eastern time, because I'm not sure that's a game that's going to be very competitive after about the first or second quarter, the way California is playing right now, in their first 5 games here.
No, I agree with you. Especially last week, I had put a little bit more stock into Cal. I think that was kind of my version of Arizona. I thought Cal was going to make some noise once it got to Pac-12 play. I thought they were going to be able to pull out some wins, and Washington State just straight up embarrassed them at home. And I don't think they've got everything down. Again, I thought they were probably going to grasp this system a little bit quicker than they have. I mean, they haven't yet. So going forward here with this game, this is an academic win for UCLA. They should go in, run it down their throats and win this one pretty easily. So I think UCLA will take this game 27-7. Eric, what do you think?
What is up with you and your low scores, man? 27-7. You know, Cal's going to throw for like 900 yards. You know, they're probably only going to score twice because that's kind of been the status quo through 5 games. But there's no way that they score 7 points and that UCLA only musters 27 against that California defense. Come on.
It's my theme for the week, man.
It is. It's like you're cutting scores in half. I'm just going to double it. I'm just going to double down on this one and go 54-14 just because you went 27-7. We're going to double.
Sounds good.
That's what I'll say.
Okay, sounds good. All right, let's hit the last game of the night here. I'll lead you in. Oregon State, Washington State. Correct me if I'm wrong here. I've loved what Oregon State's been able to do this year after bouncing back from the Eastern Washington loss. A lot of people expected it to be like a couple of years ago where they lose early and then the season just falls apart. They haven't done that. They've rebounded. They've done well. Sean Mannion is playing at an extremely high level along with Brandon Cooks there. They've got that offense rolling. They seem to be improving week by week. But does this not scream, a game that Oregon State, in the past at least, would lose on the road, a game they should win?
Well, this to me, and I'm not going to even say one way or the other yet because I want to lead in with this. To me, feels like the game we had stolen last week in Berkeley. Because I thought, last week in Berkeley we hyped up this passing frenzy where the teams could score a combined 100 points. I think this week's game, Oregon State at Washington State, could very much be that type of game because, like we said, Mannion is one of the most prolific passers in the country right now, and Holiday's not far behind. I don't know if you're right or wrong one way or the other there about Oregon State going into this game. I've been, you touched on it. I've been impressed, with the way they've kind of responded. I know, they weren't too impressive against Hawaii. Utah took them to overtime. San Diego State probably should have won that game if not for a pick 6 at the end of the game when they really could have just ran the clock out, or very nearly. But the way they beat Colorado, and now they're coming off of a bye week. I think they're going to be pretty focused here. And I think they're going to beat Washington State on the road. I think, it's going to probably be, like I said, a high-scoring game, even though you'll probably pick it to be like 7-2 based upon the way you're picking.
You stole my score.
But I like Oregon State to go in, up to Pullman. It's played at Pullman, right? It seems like they're playing all their games in Seattle this year.
Yeah.
I like them to go to Eastern Washington and represent the state of Oregon well, and beat the Cougs that were so close to my heart while I went to Gonzaga University by a score of 42-24.
Okay.
Make it 42-26 because I want to make it weird.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna do 7-5. I think Oregon State, if they want to prove they can be a player in the Pac-12 North, and this sounds very bizarre to say that you got to win against, you've got to prove that against Washington State, but Washington State has pulled out a couple of wins that I didn't think they were going to get this year. They look better to me. I think going forward they're going to keep improving. All these programs seem to be steadily getting back on track there in the Pac-12 North, and again, in the right atmosphere, Pullman is a tough place to play. About 12 years ago, that was a near impossible place to play, it seemed. And now I just, there's a part of me that really thinks Oregon State does lose this game. I will go with the Oregon State pride factor, though. And I will say Oregon State wins this game. I'll make it close, though. I'll make it 35-28. And I think, Oregon State, again, has that penchant for playing a lot of close ones this season. Probably doesn't change. I think they give Washington State some opportunities to stay in it and even win the game. But that should be a fun nightcap for anybody staying up late on Saturday night.
By the way, before we move into recruiting, because I'm assuming, Robbie, you've got some stuff to chat about there.
Got a couple things.
Yep. Couple things?
Couple
things. Got a couple things?
Yep.
Are we keeping track of our standings here on our picks each week?
We'll have a definitive standings list there for the next podcast.
Okay, sounds good. Because I feel like I'm just demolishing you.
I feel like it's the other way around.
And maybe I'm just talking out of my behind here, but I feel like I'm demolishing you and not getting any credit for it. It's what I feel like is going on.
We'll add up the stats there, and I think I got you the first week or two. So we'll have to do it, and we skipped a week as well. So
We did skip a week.
So we'll have to check.
Give me credit for 100% that week because I probably would have gotten them already.
You're thinking very highly of yourself, man. Let's move on to that recruiting stuff that we were talking about earlier. A couple things just to touch on. First, little news here on the message boards. Also, please check out Tail Feathers message boards. That's your home for Oregon football recruiting. Also, check Duck Pond, where there's a lot of great discussion about the football team in general. All of Eric's posts go up there. A lot of mine go up at Tail Feathers, so please check that out. Right now, looks like Braxton Berrios is still keeping Oregon in his favorites here, coming down to Oregon and Miami about 50-50 according to Twitter. Nice little sign for Oregon fans. Berrios was out earlier this season. Very talented East Coast wide receiver. And someone that I think a lot of people were high on. If you went to the opening, I know PHL Duck on the forums, I believe, was one of the guys who was impressed with Berrios and his composure. And he's a strong target for a team that has yet to recruit a top wide receiver in this class. Again, Oregon does have quite a few wide receivers right now, but it's always nice to keep that rotation going because you never know what's going to happen going forward. So it's definitely keep an eye out for that. Also wanted to touch on a kid who's already committed to the University of Oregon verbally. Morgan Mahalik is continuing his growth at the quarterback position for Marin Catholic. According to his weekly update from his father, Jeff, Morgan went 11 for 17 with 196 yards passing and 3 touchdowns before being pulled in the second quarter. Which, Eric, I believe you mentioned this before the show, but you said, he's getting prepared for life at Oregon, essentially right now. That's about what Mariota seems to be playing now on a weekly basis. So Marin Catholic led 53-0 at halftime. Didn't get a final score on that, but that being said, you gotta like Oregon's future prospects at quarterback if someone who wasn't even starting last year is making that kind of an impact early and really getting acclimated to that type of a system.
Robbie, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I guess I'm going to. Do we have any updated visitor lists going forward? We kind of know who's coming in for Oregon's got, I think, 3 home games in the next, following this Washington game, they got 3 home games of their next 4, I think.
Right.
Idea of who's going to be there?
UCLA, there's already some names floating around for the UCLA game there. In terms of the game the week before that, not much has been done. I think that's going to be, you're going to see more of that after the Washington game. Of course, we'll keep updating through the week for that as well. Looking at it right now, there's Bryce Dixon is listed, top West Coast tight end out of Ventura, California, is listed to come in at Oregon's next home game there on the 19th? Yeah. Getting my dates mixed up for the Washington State game, but 6'4", 220, very talented tight end. Obviously, with Oregon's prospects now, with Colt Lyerla leaving, of course, I don't know if a lot of people thought Lyerla was going to stay in the first place after next season, so really it's kind of a wash. But it'd be nice to grab either Dixon or a Henry Mondeau type. Mondeau, and according to a report earlier this week by Oregon Live, seems to be close to a decision. He's going to visit Washington first very soon, and he's already visited Oregon, and then it sounds like it's probably going to come down to those 2 schools. And then in terms of, just real quick, just wanted to put in for the UCLA game there the next week, right now on the visitor list, Monte Nicholson, a 4-star safety out of Monroeville, Pennsylvania, 6'3", 200-pound prospect, is slated to be out there. Jaleel Wadood, a 20th ranked 4-star cornerback, according to Scout.com, out of Bellflower, California. 5'11", 170 pounds are his measurables. He will be out there. And Juju Smith, John Juju Smith, Juju being his nickname, very fun to say, by the way. 5-star number. Say yeah, exactly.
Juju Beans.
So a 5-star prospect, number 1 ranked safety in Scouts database, will be at Oregon there for the UCLA game as well. I also believe Royce Freeman told me he would be out there for that, so that brings the list up to 4. I'll confirm that as the date gets closer. But sounds like Oregon's going to have quite a visitor list for the UCLA game, which is a pretty high, actually the most high-profile game coming to Autzen at this point this season.
I believe Mike Quick will be announcing he'll be visiting that week, and then probably not visiting as well. Is that kind of?
I think that's just a common thing now. I think you should just assume that he's going to visit and then not visit every single week until he actually does show up. Seems to be definitely a common thread. That can be a running theme on this show.
I think it will be. Let's make it up. We'll have Mike a quick shout out at the end until he visits Oregon or commits.
Exactly. There you go. And then also wanted to touch on this. Obviously, someone who's going to be have all eyes pretty much, very tightly connected with both programs. He'll have all eyes on this game this weekend. Bellevue, Washington safety Buda Baker. Out there in the Washington area, considering Oregon, Washington, and UCLA, his top three right now. Eliminated a couple of schools there. I know one of them was A&M. I think the other one was Arizona State.
Yeah.
So he's now got to go visit the schools again. He said he'd do that after the season. But I think this is very good news for Oregon fans. Again, Baker has the ability to not only be a force on defense, but also on offense as well, as we saw at the opening. Could play a little slot wide receiver, can play a little running back. Very versatile athlete, very speedy, 5'10", 176 is what he's listed at now. Brandon Huffman had that report, so go check his stuff out. Him and Greg Biggins both, they've been doing a great job just getting some reports from some top guys there and posting them on the message boards. So that was kind of what I wanted to touch on this week. Also, if you feel inclined, did post verbal commitment highlights for the 2014 class of the 9 players that are attached to that list right now. Put links to all of their highlights on the Tail Feathers board. There's been a lot of discussion on it. We got 34 people already commenting on it since I put it up last week. And really, it's just a fun debate topic. And also the nice thing about those links is if you keep checking back and clicking the links, usually on a week-by-week basis, that the videos get updated game by game. So keep checking in for that. You'll see a lot of the progress for what Oregon's got coming in the future. All right, so that, I believe, Eric, did you want to touch on anything else?
I think we're good.
Okay, so
except for probably a reminder that we will be up in Seattle this weekend along with Steve Summers and a photographer. I'm not sure.
Rich Colbell.
Rich Colbell. I wasn't sure if it was Rich or not. Okay, so we will have a photographer. The 4 of us will be up in Seattle this weekend for the Oregon-Washington game. So we will have coverage. So be sure to check that out on Saturday night. Hopefully it will be positive coverage after an Oregon victory, extending that win streak to 10 in a row. Regardless of the outcome, though, we will be up there and we will have stories. Also, just a reminder to everybody that we do post-game podcasts. We've noticed there's been a bit of a decline in terms of viewership for the post-game podcast as opposed to the midweek preview podcast. So those are great. Always check those out. Robbie and I will kind of include some insight into what we saw from the game and probably play a little audio from what we hear afterwards. There's a very good chance that podcast could be done from the back of a vehicle, I think. Robbie, is that fair to say, on the drive back from Seattle to Portland?
Either that or we're going to find Section 37 inside Husky Stadium and try and punch it out real quick. I think we should.
There's a Section 37. I hope it's empty.
Exactly. So, all right. Well, let's wrap that up there. You guys got quite a bit of coverage heading into the game. Again, spread the word. If you like the podcast, keep it going. Pay it forward to other people there. And we will talk to you there on Saturday and be recording Saturday night for the 25th edition of the eDuck podcast. I'm Robbie Boydston.
Scopel out.